This week's episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast is brought to you by SugarCRM. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, SugarCRM can introduce you to modern, insight-driven sales. Energize your CRM with Sugar. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites like IEN.com and manufacturing.net and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification whenever we go live. Jeff, how are you doing? Also, Anna wants to keep it tight, so
good.
Jeff's good. Anna?
Fine.
And Anna's fine. We got a real barn burner of an episode for you this week, but let's jump into a word from our sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by SugarCRM, featured as a leader in IDC's MarketScape, worldwide B2B CRM Platform Software for Industrial Manufacturing 2024 Vendor Assessment. Providing personalized and user-friendly experiences for B2B customers is critical for retaining lasting business relationships. However, doing this at scale can be difficult, but it doesn't have to be if you select the right CRM provider. This report reveals which CRM software vendors best serve industrial manufacturers and their customers. Download the IDC MarketScape 2024 CRM Platform Vendor Assessment right now. Our first story this week. GM to invest $888 million to upgrade engine facility in Western New York. General Motors recently announced plans to invest $888 million to make new V8 engines at its Tonawanda propulsion plant in Western New York. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says the project will support 870 jobs at the factory, including 177 jobs that were deemed, quote, at risk. Empire State Development will provide nearly $17 million in performance-based tax credits. The investment's going to include new state-of-the-art machinery, equipment, tools, and facility upgrades. GM's 6th-generation V8 engines are used in full-size trucks and SUVs, and the factory will still make the 5th-generation V8 engines while the plant is upgraded. The project on the plant is expected to start this July and will be completed sometime in 2027. The investment will be GM's single largest ever made in an engine plant. Jeff, this investment makes sense to me. Bigger and better engines for GM's most popular big-ticket items.
Pretty much essential. I mean, when you look at it, this is the engine probably used in 80% of the vehicles they offer. They're not making a lot of sedans anymore. It's pretty much all trucks and SUVs. So on top of that, it's probably like 90% of their sales, especially when you get into fleets and commercial sales and things like that. So makes a ton of sense to make these investments. The things that stood out to me here a little bit is, we saw some of the comments on the site about, internal combustion engines. Well, that's great. That's true. But there is also some folks out there who are speculating that these could also be hybrid developments that they're talking about here too. This isn't just your traditional, this isn't your dad's V8. Mm-hmm. There's also some things that could be going on here to support some of the other types of engines that they want to start introducing here. So good all the way around. I also thought it was very interesting that they made a point of mentioning 177 jobs that were at risk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means exactly. It's great to make these investments. I guess you're saving jobs by updating the plant so they're not going to send them elsewhere, but why would you make a point of saying that? That just seems very, very odd. And
I think because of the 17 million, right? That's how they kind of tie in. We're giving them 17 million, but we saved 180 jobs.
I guess it feels like that almost incites paranoia in some way, shape, or form at that plant. Oh man, what's coming next here? Yeah. And I don't know. Overall, great story. Good stuff. Glad this is happening, especially in this community and this this facility has such a legacy of putting out these motors and everything for GM. So very good. Just an odd sort of element to introduce in there, in my opinion.
I guess it was the governor that said that. So maybe the governor was like, hey, they kind of made some threats to cut 180 jobs. So,
that's why we gave him the money. Yeah,
okay.
Probably.
Anna, and one thing that just came to me now, because it was such an arbitrary number, right? Mm-hmm. $888 million. Is that because it's for the V8 engine? They're like,
to be.
They're like, we were going to do 889, but you know what? It's 888 for the V8. Stamp of approval.
Yep, we're going to cut $1 million out of this.
Yep. Or round up.
It's David's beautiful mind messing with all the numbers here.
I don't think this is being out on a limb here. I think this is rock solid.
I didn't notice that, and I wouldn't pay any mind to that, David. I would just let that one float away.
Let it sink in.
No, I agree with Jeff when you said that potentially these could be a hybrid development. I think so too. I don't know for sure, but GM was also very cagey about how the fuel consumption and emission changes would be developed. They called them new combustion and thermal management innovations. Mm-hmm. But they're looking at a cleaner V8, as you said, which should be interesting to see kind of what happens here. They haven't confirmed that there's any electrification involved, but I don't think we should, I think that
it has to be.
Yeah, and they've put a ton of money into developing that. They have a lot of technology there. So, why not, Mm-hmm. But it was interesting because the company has maintained its pledge that it will go all electric by the I think it's like 2035, something like that. They announced that goal in 2019. They reaffirmed it as recently as October, so not that long ago. But the company has been kind of hedging a little bit on that, saying things like, we want to be responsive to where the customer is, which I feel like that really leaves the door open for gas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as Motor One says, looks like America wants V8s. But I did think that it was interesting too. I don't know if you followed this news that came out of Stellantis recently about the Dodge Charger. So that was a vehicle that was redesigned as an EV. And there was a lot of attention around that fact. They announced recently that they will also be producing it with a Hemi V8.
Oh.
Stellantis told Car and Driver that multi-energy options have always been part of the plan. I don't know if it was that obvious to everyone when a few years back they made this announcement that they were redesigning the vehicle entirely to be an electric, but you are seeing some more of that hedging, I think, in the market. As you've said in the past, though, I don't think it's because EVs aren't selling necessarily. I think people's projections were widely off in terms of what segment of their overall sales were going to be electrics. I think it was really hard for them to predict that, and that's what we're seeing is just some shifts a little bit.
Well, one thing that I liked about this story is that we really haven't had a sound bite from UAW President Sean Fain in a minute. It's been, I felt like we were talking about him every week.
We were,
and then just like things changed a bit culturally. And while the UAW, which represents a number of workers at this facility, first came out and said, oh, this is great. We're all working together, shiny, happy people. But then Sean Fain said in a statement, it's time for Ford and Stellantis to learn from GM. GM is showing that it makes good business sense for major corporations to reverse course on the destructive race to the bottom trade policies that have wreaked havoc on workers and destroyed blue collar towns and cities across America. I just missed him.
He loves that race to the bottom
phrase.
To the bottom, that is his.
That race to the bottom and the comparing like costs with like CEO pay packages. It's just like, they might even have like a Sean Fain AI now where you just punch in like the company and like a number and it spits out the statement.
I feel like he's the guy at the family get-togethers who just picks fights with everybody.
Yeah.
Like it's the 4th of July. Beautiful day, isn't it? Well, it could be better.
Could have been.
I remember when we had sunny and 80 every day.
Yeah.
Like the Packers won last week. Yeah, but they barely lost or they almost lost.
Yeah.
And you're just like, Come on, man.
Sean.
Be chipper.
Yeah.
Right?
There's potato
Smile,
salad.
Sean.
Just
Right.
have a nice time.
Sean's the reason that families have 2 Thanksgivings.
Yeah.
You know? Just like everyone comes on Sunday or on Thursday, and then like Sean has dinner with mom on Friday.
Yeah.
You know, just like, well, I still want to see my boy. Anyway,
That was a rough one.
our next most popular story. Haribo recalls candy after traces of cannabis found. Haribo initiated a recall after small amounts of cannabis were detected. The candy maker recently took samples from the 1 kilogram packs of Haribo Happy Cola Fizz after several consumers reported feeling dizzy after eating them. The samples popped hot for pot. The contamination was found in only 3 bags of candy in the Netherlands, but to be safe, Haribo is recalling its entire stock. Police are looking into how the cannabis ended up in the candy and warned consumers to stay away from it for the time being. In a statement, local authorities said, quote, "Do not eat the sweets." Jeff, how far-reaching is the fallout for the world's largest gummy candy maker?
I mean, this is one of those things that could be very polarizing when it comes to public sentiment. Granted, this happened in the Netherlands. This wasn't right next door, I guess you could say, but still, it's going to create a lot of attention. I mean, every major news outlet covered this story. There was even reports of one of the kids was actually in a coma for a little bit.
Oh.
So there, I mean, it was significant.
Yeah,
obviously,
that's
the damage
worse
that
than
was
dizzy.
done. Yeah. But they did also come out recently. Haribo did say that this was not a production-oriented mistake. This was something that happened after the fact. So there's more criminal activity here, which means this isn't over. Like there's going to be more to this. But I mean, to your point, I think this does raise a lot of, or potentially resurfaces some of the resentment or whatever you want to say about legalizing cannabis. You know, the Pew Research has put out polls that show as many as 9 in 10 Americans are now in favor of either legalizing marijuana for medical or consumer use, one of the two. Upwards of 60% of people are saying across the board, legalize it.
Yeah.
So when you do get these headlines, it is interesting to see how that could potentially impact consumer behaviors or voter behavior, I guess you could say. We are starting to get there. You're much closer to this than I am, but we're starting to get more momentum about legalizing this and creating a new industry, billions of dollars. It'll be interesting. Hopefully we don't see any more of this, obviously. And I think when they do come out with what actually did happen in terms of what was taking place, that you know, these products were tainted.
Yeah, where did it enter the supply chain?
That'll help a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe what Haribo is waiting for, to really issue a big statement or a bigger story so they can present all of the facts there. But again, I think it also bleeds into a lot of things we talk about a lot with recalls and supply chain. It's all that visualization software and infrastructure investment. It pays for itself in situations like this.
Oh, yeah.
Where you can prove without a shadow of a doubt, this is the chain of custody. This is where the ingredients were added. And everything is right there for people to see. So having greater clarity, greater open source visualization, whatever you want to say, on everything that was taking place really paid off here for them and down the line. It's a good case study for that.
I think that it hurts Haribo more than it does the cannabis industry in general. I do think that cannabis has a lot of problems when it comes to packaging, where and we're actually going to get into a similar packaging story in a couple of minutes here, but about people that make THC infused products look like regular consumer products. And I think that when you have a loosely or largely unregulated market, you see problems like this. And yeah, it is a black eye for the industry. But for me, this is more on Haribo, because this is something getting into their products and they don't know how or why.
Or the retailer.
Or the retailer.
We don't know whose fault it is here, exactly where it took place. And it looks like it was a very limited sample size. So hopefully that continues to be the case. And we just see some bad actor that basically doing bad things.
Well, and Anna, this one for me really jumped out too, because just last weekend, you know, let's just say the pantry isn't stocked at the cottage all the time. So the latest stock of candy at the cottage was Halloween candy. And I had grabbed some Haribo gummy bears, and they also had the Haribo Happy Cola gummies from Halloween. And I just had a pack of them in my hand. And I was like, and it's crazy because just a little story like this makes you think twice about just like, they're fine, right? Yeah, they're fine. You know what? I'm going to eat them first. You know, I'm going to eat both of them first. And then if there's more in there, then I'll give them to the kids.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I think that there's so much damage, kind of soft brand perception damage that happens that is really hard to account for when something like this happened. In our neck of the woods, I don't know if you guys recall this, like it was maybe 6-8 months ago, but there was a pizza restaurant in a neighboring town.
Mm-hmm.
They were using a shared commercial kitchen and they accidentally used Delta 9 infused olive oil to produce like pizza and sandwiches over the course of about 2 days. And, multiple people went to the hospital. There was something like 85 people impacted, ages 1 to 90 or something. I mean, like lots of people until they figured out what had happened. And I always think about, so that business is still in existence. It had a really great reputation up to that point. But you wonder how many people find that story when they Google this business.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's still one of the top things that you would find. I think there's probably a lot of lost business that is really hard to, again, identify and understand exactly what you're losing.
Yeah, especially when you're on the fence between one or another,
right?
And you Google one thing and you read a headline, you're just like, "Oh, that makes up my mind. Makes it real easy for me."
Right, and so imagine what this has also done to Haribo. I think there's so many people out there who they're really particular about what they give their kids. They want to exercise a ton of caution. That would probably just say, you know what, I'm going to just choose a different brand for a while, and then as we talked about in the past, like once you brand hop, it is even harder to get that customer back. So even though this took place in a plant overseas, it was a very limited sample, as you said, really hard to know if that's because that's all that they found or that was the total impact. And again, especially when you consider that they still don't know exactly how this occurred, we don't know if it's done. We don't know if this problem is over.
Right.
If they haven't identified the cause, then it's unclear if it's contained. So I think there will be some more, impact, unfortunately, for the brand, no matter what caused this to occur.
No, this is like Haribo, the Netherlands, but Haribo globally needs to be like, we need an answer and we need it now.
Yeah.
Even if it's bad for the company. Like they need to identify the root cause so that way they can move on. I will say when I was looking for updates to this story, I did notice that we missed about 2 years ago a bit of big news, or at least I did. In April 2023, they made the world's largest gummy bear.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't Haribo, actually. It was Tannis, if you remember that gummy
I
manufacturer.
do.
We've covered them before previously. Both
Tannis
in good
and
ways
Tannis,
and bad. Yeah, both Tannises, the Tannis Jeff, how much do you think the world's largest gummy bear weighs? Actually, it's kind of funny that
just
I was mentioning
that much gummy bear. Just man.
Yeah, it's the same as let's say a no frills Dodge Challenger.
It's like 1,500 pounds.
3,800 pounds. So yeah, it weighs more than my RAV4 hybrid. It weighs more than my RAV4 hybrid. And so Tannis in the Netherlands in 2023 made this. It actually took it more than a week just to harden and settle up, which kind of kicked all the festivities back, because they're like, is it ever gonna be a gummy? And then did you know that food records, like these Guinness Book records, don't count unless somebody eats the entire thing? So like they had to like eat 3,800 pounds of gummy bear. That's crazy. But I never knew that. Like, so think of all the like world's largest food and beverages that we've always covered. And it doesn't count unless they've actually consumed it.
I can't believe. Do you ever see the world's largest cheeseburger or whatever? And you're just like, because you would you get like this much bun and I don't know.
And you got to eat it. Yeah, just like someone goes to throw that bun away, and you're like, whoa, put that bun down. Like you got to eat it, otherwise we lose everything. We really staked our reputation on this. Sorry, it was a wild diversion, and I apologize. It probably kicked back like podcasting for a good 10 minutes, so my bad. All right, our next most popular story. Oreo maker Mondelez sues Aldi, alleging grocery store chain copies its packaging to confuse customers. Mondelez International is suing supermarket chain Aldi, saying its store brand cookies and crackers, quote, blatantly copy products like Chips Ahoy, Nutter Butter, and Oreos. The federal lawsuit says the packaging is, quote, likely to deceive and confuse customers and threaten to irreparably harm Mondelez and its brands. The company wants money and an order to stop Aldi from selling products that infringe on its trademarks. Aldi has faced lawsuits over its packaging before. Last year in Australia, a court said Aldi infringed on the copyright of Baby Bellies, snack puffs for young children. The company also lost a suit in the UK over lemon cider packaging. Jeff, it sounds like Mondelez gave Aldi plenty of opportunities to change its packaging. And while the company discontinued or changed some of its packaging, it continued to sell others, and that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think this is Aldi basically saying, how far do you want to take this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're just going to keep pushing the limits here. And I think you're going to see more of this, or potentially you could see a lot more of this. We've talked about the generic brands and how much more popular they're getting with food costs going up. We're seeing something like 25% of all sales at a lot of retail outlets are the store brands, basically, as opposed to the name brands. At Walmart, it's getting upwards almost 40% of their sales are the generic equivalents.
Wild.
So I think you will see more of this. I was kind of curious, like what the price difference would be here to local Aldis. Oreos, $5.50. Their generic equivalent, $3.05.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at like, I think that's, you're the numbers guy.
Yeah.
I don't want to steal your thunder here.
Yeah.
No, your thunder here.
My
but
thumber?
Like, your thumber. Your thumber or your thunder.
My number thunder is my thumber.
But obviously a significant discount. And for Oreos to protect their brand a little bit, I get it.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know how successful they'll be, but I think you could see more of these. And you'd almost think some of these name brand manufacturers, you could see them sort of teaming up a little bit and trying to put a little more pressure on their retail distributors in terms of preserving, understanding they're going to have the generic equivalent, the lower priced option, but hey, don't damage our brand in the meantime after they're spending all that money in terms of marketing and packaging and establishing the product and their brand. You know, the generics are sort of feeding off of that. So I don't know. This could be the first of many of these types of situations. It's always a really delicate balance because you're also talking about the way that you sell your product here.
Yeah.
So you don't want to alienate them too much.
Well, I thought the similarities were pretty comical, you know, but I feel like this is something I see in every store. And like, what is it? It's got to be like close enough of the same color. So like that way, if they're open and on a table and everyone's eating them, they really don't realize that it's like a butter nutter and not a nutter butter. I don't know what they were called, but I mean,
Nutter.
it was pretty wild.
The packaging is extremely similar, but I do think, I don't know. I mean, you know, when you're grabbing Oreo versus the generic equivalent.
Agreed.
So there's that legal element and the common sense element that combat each other a little bit in these cases too.
And I wanted to say that, you know, hey, where there's smoke, there's fire. But with this story, I mean, where there's fire, there's fire. Like this is something that they've dealt with many, many times and lost the cases. And still they're just like, come at me, bro.
Yeah. I mean, but they've also, there's like a lot of cases that they have not lost. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
It's a very slippery legal area, it seems. And yeah, to Jeff's point around generics, you know, any grocery shopper knows that Captain Munch and Captain Crunch are right next to each other, but no one's really getting duped by that.
Yes.
And that's because companies like Mondelez spend so much money on marketing that you would know the Oreo brand in your sleep at this point in time. And I think most people, you know, are there.
Mm-hmm.
But the law around this focuses typically on things like, does the package confuse the consumer and or does the similarity lead to an unfair advantage for one party? So in this case, price, right? For a company like Aldi, where copycat suit risk is kind of built into their business, because if you've ever been in an Aldi, you know that they have their store brand of everything, and all of it is knockoff packaging. But I think they maybe find it worth it to occasionally let this play out and settle if need be. And when the law hinges upon concepts like overall consumer impression and emotional connection, there's really a lot of gray area in how these cases can be interpreted. So they do lose some, but they also win some, or they settle some. And they also make a lot of money in the meantime selling these products. And I think, you know, the decisions often factor in the purchasing context, they say, product placement, target customer base, things like that. And when you're Aldi, you sell your products in your own store. You're not on the same shelf as a Mondelez product. And I think that works in their favor because they can argue, hey, nobody is confusing us because we're not in Hy-Vee, next to 6-7 other brands.
Yeah.
This comes at a time when there's a lot of litigation taking place in CPG goods, right? We've seen that. So I read a report, Perkins and Coy is the name of the firm. They released a study that said last year litigation in food and consumer packaged goods reached an all-time high. But that's because often it's consumers going after companies about what claims are being made on the packages, sustainability claims, micro contaminants, all kinds of stuff, misleading verbiage. But I guess suffice it to say the law firms that represent this industry are very busy. But I think this case could go either way. And to be honest, I'm not offended by it. I think that if Aldi can do it, they should do it.
I honestly, for the longest time since I've been looking at cookies and snacks on shelves, I just thought this was part of the game. It's it's like how anytime you have a blockbuster movie, then you have like the knockoff from Asylum Films.
Well, I think it can be, except now we're seeing so much more attention being paid to these generics by the consumer, more than it has been in the last 10 years at least. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's why you're seeing these name brand companies, these name brand products really getting more adamant about this. And I think you're going to see some definite pressures being put on that goes beyond packaging. Looks at placement and everything else. If you want to sell our products and you're going to have your own, don't push us out of the way.
Yeah.
Because essentially Mondelez here, they're helping sell these knockoff products as well with all the marketing that Anna mentioned.
Exactly. And then Aldi is almost using that against them in their argument to say everyone already knows Oreo.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
No, I agree that we're going to see fights like this ramp up just because budgets are getting tighter. Generic brand sales, like you said, continue to go up. And, they struggle for market share and shelf space. I mean, at one time it was kind of like just funny, like, yeah, look at what they're doing over there. That's crazy. And then, when you start like chewing into profit and revenue, then it's like worth the fight.
Right.
All right. Our next most popular story. Raccoon break-in snarls Airbus jet production. So when I started covering the manufacturing industry, if you would have set the line for raccoon-related stories lifetime at 2, I would have taken the under. Yet, here we are. Airbus recently had a problem at one of its Canadian plants. And wouldn't you know it, the 5-fingered trash panda was the perpetrator. A family of raccoons were discovered in Montreal when a worker saw one climbing up the landing gear of a jet and just kind of looked at that. And anyone else see that?
Yeah.
That was weird, right?
Doesn't seem right.
The animal was the first spotted. The animal that was first spotted turned out to be the mother of 5 baby raccoons that were also in the plant. When a worker boarded the plane to hunt down the critter, they found urine, chewed wires, and other pesky problems. Reuters says workers were pulled from all areas to quarantine the jet and inspect it for damage. Airbus has a 3-year backlog and has been scrambling to speed up production, and the plane maker really declined to comment on the story. Anna, did they decline to comment on this situation just because of like the sheer embarrassment?
Well, they didn't not comment on it. They didn't comment on where the wreck, like any other damage elaboration. They did admit that this occurred.
They would admit to chewed wires and urine, but not a detail more.
Yeah. But they didn't want to go into detail as to like other impacts, I think, to the plant. They did reveal this though. I think as part of their being publicly traded.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it was a very interesting story, and it actually kind of prompted me to go look a little bit more at Airbus and their backlog, because the backlog was mentioned obviously in this Reuters report. I had not been aware of how big Airbus's backlog was, I think because we talk about Boeing all the time and their backlog. But would you believe this? So I looked actually at the numbers, and while this article says that Airbus has a 3-year backlog, actually saw the numbers broken out. And as of the end of April, Airbus reported a backlog of 8,668 jets. Meanwhile, Boeing's is 6,273. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And this excludes ghost plane rework type stuff, which both companies are dealing with.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting is that this report said that Airbus's backlog represents 10.4 years of production based on estimates, while Boeing's is about 11 years. So they're really close to each other in terms of how much they have to get caught up. Forecast International adds that aviation manufacturing continues to face several headwinds that are clouding OEMs' goals of rapidly ramping up production to meet demand. Those include, of course, supply chain issues, which we've talked about extensively here in that industry. But they added to that tariffs having complicated the outlook for a production ramp up, which is fair. But their current forecast for Airbus projects just 821 deliveries for 2025, which they say pushes a full recovery to pre-pandemic production levels into 2026. So they're not even there yet. And they consider that to be a best case scenario would be 2026. So does a raccoon problem help ever? No. But I think it was interesting that it also kind of shined a light on the fact that Airbus is already dealing with these tremendous delays, perhaps par for the course in Aero, but nonetheless a huge challenge, and also kind of brings into perspective, we know that Boeing struggled intensely with the MAX shutdown, all the rework that had to be done, but maybe they're doing okay based on those circumstances being like huge variables in an already very tough industry to stay on track.
Yeah, it's comparable. And I just see a couple of employees at Airbus with like their Boeing Google Alert set up and just every morning checking it, just going like, oh yeah, no, we bought another couple of days. We're fine.
No one's still talking about Boeing.
No one's looking at Airbus right now. Jeff, Airbus said the raccoons were moved to a, quote, safe location. Do you believe they are safely 6 feet underground right now?
No, I do not think that they were taken care of that way.
They probably moved them to a different airplane.
Yeah,
that was already done.
Throw them in the scrapyard in the back. They'll have a great home.
Well, one of the things that does there's a couple things here, and the backlog makes sense, but what's the strain on this facility when they didn't notice a raccoon?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of comical, right? But at the same time, if there's all this backlog and all this production pressure, to not see a raccoon walking around.
That's head down.
And a family. A raccoon that is clearly birthed.
You may need to reevaluate your workload a little bit, or just people's attention to detail on an expanded level. Like is everybody just like so zoned in on what they are doing that they're just oblivious to everything else going on here? Yeah. Like a raccoon peeing all over an airplane. I mean,
did anyone know that like order 675 smells like pee?
Yeah.
All it takes is an open chimney. All I'm saying.
Oh, well, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other
part
of
an open
this,
dock
though.
door. I mean, really, if a raccoon is like about to have babies, they look for a safe place to be. I mean,
but that's the other thing that kind of got me here. Like, what else is in this area? Because noise is supposed to be one of the biggest deterrents for raccoons.
Yeah.
There's nothing much louder than a manufacturing plant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially when you're making that many airplanes, or supposed to be making that many airplanes.
Yeah.
So what else is wandering around that the raccoon's like, I'm taking this place over here. This is way better than the woods that I came from.
Yeah.
So
nobody's even in this plane.
Yeah.
Just get in there.
Lots of interesting stuff there. But I mean, Airbus obviously has some things to look at. Another thing, talking about all those backlogs with both of those companies, how is there not a third player here yet? That's the thing that gets me. I understand that aerospace is very comfortable with much expanded timelines and having thousands of planes on back order, but it just feels like somebody would see an opportunity there.
Yeah. And I feel like there is a heck of a window, in a lot of business that could be stolen.
I think that people would embrace another option right now.
One other business that could be won. But no, I completely agree. Having worked in some manufacturing facilities where the shop door is always open because they don't necessarily have air conditioning or something like that, I understand that there can be pest problems, but you should at least have like a bare bones like mitigation at the doors, and that was the other thing that really stood out to me, Jeff. I was just like, no one like heard the hissing or like...
Yeah, well, they're not exactly clean animals. They're not that sneaky. I mean, they're really not. They look like it, but they're not. I mean...
And it was busted, climbing up the landing gear?
Yeah. And like, I could just imagine like this team of people and like one person saw it, like, anybody else see that? Like, and then just be like, I think a raccoon just climbed the landing gear. Just no one would take him seriously. Well, hopefully the workers held a raffle and they, each one got a tiny little raccoon baby that they will now care for forever.
Yeah.
Turn into Instagram stars.
Yeah.
All right. Our most popular story this week, 3,000 vehicles stranded, Pacific Ocean ship fire. A ship carrying thousands of vehicles was recently abandoned in the Pacific Ocean after a fire broke out on board. The Morning Midas, a cargo ship, was on a 19-day voyage from Asia to Mexico. The vessel was 300 miles from Adak, Alaska, when smoke was seen on one of the decks. The crew couldn't put out the fire, so all 22 of them evacuated safely to a nearby ship. The ship was carrying 3,000 vehicles. About 800 of them were electric. And as we know, once EV batteries ignite, the fires can be notoriously challenging to fully extinguish. A tug carrying salvage specialists and special equipment arrived late last week. The ship's management company, London-based Zodiac Maritime, said the specialists will assess the ship's condition, and a separate tug with firefighting and ocean towage capabilities is also being arranged. In the meantime, officials can do little but kind of observe and report, watching it burn. Jeff, it's hard to make an assessment until we really have more details, but we can at least say that no one was harmed before they evacuated.
Agreed. And, that was one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is there's 22 people on the size of a ship that's basically 2 football fields long.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a huge, huge vessel. Granted, I've never been on board, but that seems like a lack of manpower. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to start looking more closely at these incidents when it comes to cargo ships. There's a lot of different stats out there. One of the problems, quite honestly, is that we don't have one leading organization when it comes to cargo ship safety, regulation, all that. There's a lot of regional ones. There's governmental outfits, whether it's the U.S., Europe, so on and so forth. There's no standardization. Well, we know without a shadow of a doubt, there's going to be more cargo ships hauling more cargo all the time. Mm-hmm. That's going nowhere. Right now, it's estimated by the International Chamber of Shipping that they are short about 90,000 workers when it comes to cargo ship workforce.
Yeah.
That's a huge issue. And that's why we continue to hear more and more about this. There's a 10% increase in incidents on board cargo ships. We've covered a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's more and more boxes being lost all the time. So there's lost cargo, which drives up issues and problems for the cargo ship, which they're losing money every time they lose one because they're overloading these ships. It's creating safety issues. All of this is just compounding on each other. We need to get a hold of this situation or we're going to see more and more of this, which not only creates environmental issues, it not only creates supply chain issues, it creates actual funding issues for these companies. They're losing millions of dollars here.
Yeah.
So when you look at all of the different factors involved here, it is crying out for more support and more help. And I think there's just been this sort of blind eye turned to a lot of this because it's going across the ocean. It's going to be weeks or months before it gets to its final destination. Why do we need to keep an eye on this stuff all the time? Well, when you put more strain and more pressure on any route, any medium of shipping product, there's going to be more of these things that are turning up. And we need to find more people to work on these ships. We need to make them safer to work on so that we can actually get product from point A to point B without this type of stuff happening.
So, to your point, benefit of global trade war, less of a strain on the supply chain.
But it's not. They're putting more and more because there is such a tariff fear right now.
Oh, true. Right now, yeah.
There is more stuff coming over on those ships, and they're just overloading them. Like I said, they're losing more and more boxes off these ships all the time.
That is wild. A 10% increase
in incidents, yeah.
Anna, we have a couple of readers that always want to, they want to see the footage. They want to see the photos. And really, you broke the story before it was anywhere else. So we just didn't have that. But by the time I saw a video, because, as of this morning, this thing was like still burning. Mm-hmm. And just looking at the fire, I was kind of surprised that it wasn't like a huge blaze. It was just smoke was still pouring out. It's still bad. But when you think of like 800 EVs and hybrids, I mean, if those were all to catch fire, it would be fast and violent.
Yeah, and the latest on this is that the fire is not under control yet, that it is in fact spreading. 4 days into the fire, the Coast Guard reported that there was a visible sheen in the water and visible flames coming off the stern. They said the fire had spread to multiple decks and the vessel appeared to be listing by the stern. So a salvage tug with, the equipment that you mentioned, the specialist, that was expected to arrive at the scene kind of as we speak right now.
Yeah.
So by the time this comes out, tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah.
There may be more on that. I don't know. But you mentioned the EVs and the hybrids. So since this was first reported, it was clarified that there's like something like 60 something pure EVs, and then the rest of that 800 number were actually hybrids, which doesn't help because they're just the battery plus gas. So even more of a fire risk there. But the ships also got like a huge fuel store. Hundreds of metric tons of gas, fuel, low sulfur fuel oil, they said on this ship. So I think it really illustrates just how complex the situation can be, because already it's hard to put out a fire on a ship. It already is. But when you look at the risk profile, as experts refer to it, of these electric vehicles on these ships, you have the thermal runaway issue, which we've talked about at length. When these batteries start on fire and they reach these extremely hot temperatures, they're very difficult to put out. But water actually makes that worse. And then you also have this risk of reignition, plus you have all this gas. So, fires having had increased on ships, so they hit a high in 2024, according to reports. Insurance costs are going up, to Jeff's point. So you have people actually asking at this point, like, can we import these vehicles this way? Can we put them on a ship and risk losing 3,000 vehicles at sea plus the ship, which is what happened last time, just sank, which I feel like is likely.
Yeah.
Is this the way to do it? And I don't think that people have come up with another way yet, but maybe the solution is not importing the vehicles. I don't know if it can be done well, or if there's a new mitigation system that all of these ships are going to have to retrofit, which I know that there's new ways of putting out these fires, and they've done a lot of research and development there and come up with some solutions there. But yeah, I know with the tariffs also, and then this process. And insurance costs just adding to the equation here. Like, if it's so expensive to insure your ship to bring these over, people are going to stop doing it,
Well, and I always, we do a lot of these stories, and I always expect it to be an older ship, but I think this one was less than 20 years old. It was like made in 2006. It was a 600-foot carrier. Some of the specifics on the numbers you were mentioning, Anna, 3,159 vehicles on board at the time of the incident, 65 fully electric, 681 hybrids. Talking about metric tons of fuel, 350 metric tons of gas, 1,530 metric tons of fuel oil. That is a problem environmentally. And I don't know, I was not encouraged to hear like, yeah, we got a couple tugs heading out there, and then another one's coming, should be there sometime today.
Check it out when we get there to get the lay of the land. Like,
doesn't look good, but we're going to assess. I don't know. I'm hoping they get this thing out of the water.
Well, at this point, it's going to have to let it go its course. I mean, just because you can't see the fire, I mean, it's got to be.
Oh, I know. I'm sure it's been burning for 4 days. But yeah, it would be nice if there were other strategies in place where you could at least safely maybe try and get this thing closer to shore. I don't know. Like,
I don't think you want it closer to shore.
Well, I guess I don't know. Like, so that way the option isn't just like she's gonna sink. Like, we'll throw some booms out there. Hopefully get as much as we can in a pool and vacuum it off the top. All right. Well, before we jump into, in case you missed it, we have another word from this week's sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by SugarCRM, featured as a leader in IDC's MarketScape, worldwide B2B CRM platform software for industrial manufacturing 2024 vendor assessment. Providing personalized and user-friendly experiences for B2B customers is critical for retaining lasting business relationships. However, doing this at scale can be difficult, but it doesn't have to be if you select the right CRM provider. This report reveals which CRM software vendors best serve industrial manufacturers and their customers. So download the IDC MarketScape 2024 CRM Platform Vendor Assessment right now. All right, in case you missed it, stories maybe not as popular on the sites, but could make a big impact on the industry going forward. Jeff, I'm going to start with you this week. What's your in case you missed it?
So I picked a story here. It's called States Are Rolling Out Red Carpets for Data Centers. This one really caught me. I thought it's very interesting. The article talks about the explosive growth of data centers needed to power America's fast-rising demand for AI and cloud computing platforms, and it spurred states to dangle incentives in hopes of landing an economic bonanza. But it's also eliciting pushback from lawmakers and communities. The crux of the article is basically states want these data centers. They want companies to come in and build them because consumers want more access to everything that they're streaming right now, everything that they're obtaining via the web, whether it's programming and streaming stuff at home, whether it's information for work, greater capacities because of these more powerful AI-generated programs. All the things, basically. We need more data centers, especially from a security perspective, with more people wanting to put it in the cloud, not have that on-site expense and maintenance and everything else that goes with it, which sounds great, except these things are taking up huge swaths of land.
Yeah.
And guess what? They also consume a ton of energy.
Yeah.
Okay. They are just gluttons for energy, which we've talked about our grid numerous times before. How do you balance this? How do you balance the demand for all of this data access or storage, along with the fact that it's consuming so much energy that's taking away from consumers, driving up utility bills, all of these things? So states are caught between trying to serve the public, but also damaging it at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult sort of process to navigate in trying to balance all those factors. It made me think a little bit about another story we ran this week, talking about Meta bringing in their own nuclear facility, essentially establishing that to help power their data centers, which makes sense. And I wonder if that's not a trend as well and how we're going to balance all this out. They don't make dirt anymore, right? So expanding and providing hundreds, not dozens anymore, hundreds of acres of land for these expansive data centers. A lot of communities are not happy about this. They see that this could be a better economic development area. Why are we just basically putting the equivalent of a digital warehouse up?
Yeah.
It's
one
not
big
a huge
server room.
Yeah, it's not a big job creator. It's not a big economic stimulator other than some of the peripheral things that can pop up. So it's a very delicate balance. Where I'm most concerned, again, when we talk about these data centers, whether it's for AI or anything else, it's the energy. It's what we're doing for the grid. And I think a lot more focus needs to be put on not how we're going to pay for these data centers, how we're going to power them. Yeah. That needs to be a greater focus and concern. And that's what a lot of lawmakers and community advocates are pushing right now. So there's some give and take here.
I think that we sometimes forget how fragile our grid is.
Yeah.
I was recently talking to a friend that works in the energy sector, and he was talking about how, when we were on this trajectory for EVs rolling out, like all these energy companies were talking about how they were going to need to do rolling brownouts if all of a sudden everybody had an EV, just because that was going to be the transition period before everything was ready. And I guess I didn't until I heard that, I was always just like, I guess it was like the optimist in me that was like, I'll figure it out in time. But that was the kind of transition contingency plan, was just like, just sometimes you won't have power. And so I do think that there needs to be a greater emphasis in this. And I do like the idea of these sort of micro nuclear plants powering these things. I don't know. I think it's kind of exciting.
Well, that's the other thing the article talks a little bit about is the microgrid.
Yeah.
And a lot of these corporate entities that are putting up these data centers essentially also have to be responsible for their own utility, if you will, as opposed to plugging into what's already there.
Anna, what did you think? Would you roll out the red carpet for a data center?
Well, no, I mean, I think that, there's a lot of this. I thought this article was pretty balanced in terms of its review of some of the pros and cons. They talked about a case in South Carolina where the governor had signed some legislation to kind of speed up the regulatory process and ease some of those constraints so they could get some of these up and running faster. And it was pretty controversial. And that was because people were worried about how much energy they were going to use, how much land, and then also forcing ratepayers to finance some of these projects, which is essentially what was happening. It does happen. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to, you talk about EVs, like I think they got like hooked in, took a lot of blame for some of that stuff, but it's not just EVs, it's crypto, and it's people being on their phones all day long and charging their phones every single day, and
everybody making an action figure out of themselves on ChatGPT.
Yes, AI. I know, it's like data, all that stuff is what's driving the energy use. So I mean, we can blame electric vehicles if we want, but that's not going to stop the problem, just there's a lot to it. And I think yes, making choices in a measured way and not just assuming that we'll figure it out later is the best.
No, it was, I wasn't saying blaming EVs, just that the trajectory they were on, they weren't going to be able to sort of meet those deadlines. But I mean, you're right. Everything is becoming more and more power hungry. And I can't remember what the stat was, but it's like the multiple of processing power that it takes for AI to do something is incredible.
Yeah.
And everybody's doing it right now. So we need to fix some things. Mine, in case you missed it this week, was an article, Transforming Facilities Management with 3D Scanning. It was this really interesting real use case study from the field. 3D scanning can reshape the way facilities think about repairs, asset maintenance, and product life cycles. Using portable 3D scanners, technicians are capturing detailed digital models of damaged or aging parts in minutes in the field. This article spotlights the Colt Group, a provider of leak repair and mechanical services across the United States. The company is using 3D scanning to rapidly repair leaking piping systems and continuous cycle production facilities. Previously, the Colt Group engineers would come on site at a customer's refinery or plant and measure the affected areas of piping with manual sketches. Once they were ready, these drawings or 2D PDFs would then be sent to the engineering team so they could design a part, come up with a repair solution. This process took multiple team members several hours. Now, they take an Artec Leo 3D scanner, capture the as-fitted geometries in the field, and then customize repair solutions. The company says the new process is 18 times faster. Saving the team time and money while minimizing the environmental impacts of leaks. Now, I chose the story because when I think 3D scanning, I think reverse engineering, I think product development. I don't necessarily think proactive and preventative maintenance. And that's why I thought this was cool, because the images, also they sent like 30 images, and the two that we published were just cool. It is a pipe that's leaking. They scan it, and they can basically create a fix way faster than they ever could before. And I thought it was just a really cool use case for 3D scanning. And these 3D scanners are getting more commercially available, easier to get in people's hands, so they can kind of come up with these really unique applications. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to check this out, but I just thought that this was a cool look at sort of the future of maintenance in the field.
Absolutely. And these are types of tools. When you talk about reverse engineering and these 3D scanners, we've been talking about these for 10 or 15 years.
No, for so long.
But it has been, like you said, more for reverse engineering and troubleshooting, product development, things like that. I think the first thing that jumped out at me with this story is it sort of combines those two entities of maintenance right now. We look at the machine whisperer, sort of the old school, along with the new age analytics and data that we're using, because the machine whisperer knew exactly where things were going to leak.
Yeah.
Over time, they just develop a legacy understanding of this is our problem area. We're always going to have to go here every couple of years and fix this leak, or this is going to be what we need to do, what we need to focus on. Now, there's just this more proactive dynamic in potentially putting forth solutions that are going to last much longer.
Yeah.
And you don't need to waste the time and energy going back every couple of years and patching it up.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, we talked about how some of these companies are using AI to have a better understanding of what's available in inventory. And if you can hit the part with a 3D scanner, it feeds it into the AI engine, and then it specs a part that you have in your inventory to make the fix. Talk about a real savings in time and resources.
Well, better yet, sends it to a 3D printer, creates the part.
Yeah.
You don't have to have inventory.
Mm-hmm.
True. That's true. I mean, it's going to have to be an intense 3D printer if it's an oil and gas. But I mean, no, eventually. So other use cases for this, Anna, proactive maintenance planning. 3D scans can be captured and compared over time to track equipment wear and tear, identifying issues before they become failures. Improving documentation. High-res digital records are simplifying compliance and audit processes. Materials and environmental savings. These 3D scans are enabling better planning, which means fewer mistakes, less waste, and minimized emissions, and scalability across sites. So once a digital workflow is established, it can be replicated and standardized across multiple locations. I don't know. Again, I pitched it to you with these were the types of applications that we sort of saw as possible, and it's kind of cool to see these real world use cases coming to fruition.
I totally agree. And, you know, the middle point between the Machine Whisperer and this was for a time, and still is in use, was like a video or a photo that was coming back in real time. And when that technology kind of broke, the maintenance industry was like, yes, field capable devices that can speak in real time. You can visualize what's actually happening in the field. You know, this is taking that and, you know, amplifying it even further. And like, yeah, it's super exciting to see.
What was your In Case You Missed It this week?
Ooh. What was my In Case You Missed It this week? Oh, okay. So I picked a story about America's oldest cheesemaker.
Yeah.
The company is called Crowley Cheese, and it's based in Vermont, and it calls itself the country's oldest continuously operating cheesemaker. Well, they recently announced that they're going up for sale. Galen and Jill Jones have owned and operated the historic company since 2009. They're preparing to retire, and they have invited interested parties to contact them directly if they want to buy a cheese company.
Hey, you want to buy a cheese company?
Yeah, it's kind of probably a difficult pitch.
Yeah.
Not for everyone. But they say, you know, preserving the integrity of this historic factory has always guided their work. And so they're hoping that someone will come in, apply some fresh leadership, and kind of do the same. Keep it going, foster the company that has been around since commercially since 1824. But they say they can trace the cheese making roots to the late 1700s. Whoa.
Man, that is a lot of cheese experience.
It is. Although the current owners bought the company in 2009. So
okay.
Less.
But you're buying the legacy.
Buying the legacy. So as a Wisconsinite, I had to fact check this because I was like, well, I know Vermont is also known for cheese, but come on.
Yeah.
I could not find a commercial cheese producer that beats this in Wisconsin, though that's not to say that they didn't exist. But still, in my research, I did find on the Wisconsin Department of Tourism website they have 2 regionally specific 3-day cheese tour guides. So for those of you who are looking for something to do this summer, one of them is in the Milwaukee area. One's more in like the Driftless region, Madison area. But it's 3 days. They walk you completely through it, all your stops, where to go. And so forget about Vermont is the takeaway here. And just come to Wisconsin and do some cheese tours. And they're not factory tours, just like the places to stop to get the best cheese.
I mean, that sounds terrific.
Sounds like Vermont's given up. They're not.
Yeah, they're out of the cheese game.
They're out of the cheese game.
They're bailing on it. I mean, my takeaway is that if you are looking to move your company, you need to find some sort of unique differentiator and put it out there. Just like we were the first company to put the number 2 on the pencil.
Yeah.
Up until us.
Want to work
there were
here,
only number 1. Jeff, when you look at the story about Crowley Cheese, what are some of your takeaways?
Well, this takes me back when I was growing up. All the small towns where I grew up, they all had cheese factories.
For sure.
And that's exactly what this is. Pretty cool. I mean, those have slowly gone away with the whole dynamic with the family dairy farm also fading a bit. So it's kind of cool to see if this is still there. You hope somebody can buy this and keep the tradition going.
Yeah.
Because I definitely missed that. I mean, growing up, we had Radloff's cheese in Eustis Ford, which was actually pretty well known throughout even southeastern Wisconsin. So when you do have this much legacy in any product, you definitely want to see it continue. So pretty cool.
Well, and I know that we pushed the podcast to a different date without like really letting anybody know. But if we're gonna shoot the podcast before lunch, I think we gotta have like a no food manufacturing story.
No cheese
it's
stories.
Like,
yeah.
At first, I was like mentally prepared to fire through an Oreo story on a
Yeah.
hungry stomach, but like all of a sudden, I pull up some aged cheddar photos, and I'm just like, yep, we're gonna have to get out of here like at once. It is cheese time.
And the raccoon urine didn't do anything to that, or
No. As much as thinking about chewing on wires.
I think when you mentioned the 3,800-pound gummy bear, that pretty much extinguished my appetite. That just sounds like the grossest thing ever.
It was, and it's so because they revealed it. You know, it was on its back. Obviously, it can't stand, and it just looks like it almost looks like a giant gummy bear on like a morgue slab. You know, just kind of like they pulled it out of the casket, and you're just like, there's something unnatural.
Pay
about
your
that.
Respects.
Yeah, and I don't know how many employees they have, but could you imagine just like, yeah, no, that's not a gift. You need to crush 50 pounds of gummy bear by the end of the weekend, or you can't come back. All right. Well, before we get out of here, let's do our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
So kind of jumping off from that, we are trying to do more local things this summer, my family, because we live in an amazing city, and I feel like we're always leaving in the summer.
Yeah.
So that's been the goal, is trying to get the kids around to like some of the things that make our town and our region, you know, why people come to visit us. On that same note, I thought it was interesting. So I was a chaperone for my daughter's 4th grade field trip on Friday, and we went to the Wisconsin State Capitol in Madison, the building, and had a guided tour. And I've actually never done that. I've lived in this town for, 20 plus years, and it was wonderful, and I loved it. And I highly recommend, if you have a summer that with some availability to, well, you don't have to do that, but like, see like, you know, right outside your door what you can do, because there's so much stuff that where you're just like, man, I forgot about this place, or I haven't been here in years. You know, I see it every day, and I never stop because I'm always going to work or whatever. But yeah, it was really fun. So
I think it's great. It's a great thing to be a tourist in your own town.
For sure, yeah.
You know, like a lot of these things you never do until a friend comes to town. They want to see this, they want to go there, and you're just like, that's what tourists do. And then you go with them, and you're like, this place is great.
I love it here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that I'm a sucker for small town museums and stuff like that. I always like, you know, it's rare that you regret something like that, where you go and you see like the world's oldest or America's oldest cheesemaker if it's local to you. But I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool idea. And I mean, hey, let us know when you're going out. That sounds like a great time.
All right, I will.
I can drag both of our families down as I'm like, I need to read 3 more of these tablets and then we can go. It's like, I need the full story. My final thought is that Father's Day is coming up this weekend. And so just a shout out to all the fathers out there. You know, everything that you do is incredible. And, you know, I'm not just speaking like this as a father, but, you know, also when it comes to like gift giving for fathers and dads, like you don't have to overthink it. You know, like for the better part of 30 years, it was like a box of Whoppers for my dad. And he was just like, thanks.
Yeah.
You know, there are just so many of these custom gifts that you can buy in your algorithms, like that turn your dad into a Pokemon card. It's like sometimes it could just be like a new set of skank tees, you know, like, or white t-shirts. Sorry, that's what I call them. You don't have to overthink it. But happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, and you know, to all the moms out there. Thanks for sticking around. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
So I had a little bit of a project around the house this weekend.
Okay.
And it was replacing a shower head.
Oh.
And I thought basically what I could do was take the shower head apart, clean it, put it back on.
Yeah.
So I'm doing this, got it apart, looking at it, and it has this spring on there that is very stiff. Now, I'm not a small guy. I don't think I'm a weak individual. I am pushing and pressing and doing everything, trying to find online schematics of how this is all supposed to fit together between the seals and the plastic washers and this spring and the other moving parts. And for about 2 hours, I am just pushing on this thing, trying to get this stupid shower head back together after we cleaned it out.
Yeah.
So finally, and I'm not going to say the name brand because whatever. Finally, I find something in like the deepest, darkest places of the web saying, some of these shower heads cannot be taken apart when clean.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So first of all, that could have been more publicly aware.
Just do
Yeah,
not,
front and center with that.
Secondly, why would you allow for this shower head to come apart so easily if you're not supposed to take it apart? It ruined my Friday night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just trying to get the stupid shower head back on. And then basically you just had to go, I had to buy a new one.
Yeah.
Which would have been, if I knew that up front,
Fine. Yeah.
not a problem.
Yeah.
But it just put a real damper on the start of my weekend, just prying and pushing, thinking like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why can I not see how this is going to go together?
Yeah. Just
And,
a small etching on there that says, don't open this.
Yeah, don't
do
let it come apart.
Yeah.
So product development insight
Oh,
here.
poor Jeff.
If
Yeah.
you're not supposed to take something apart, don't let it be taken apart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just say replace head.
Put
Yeah.
a little stop sign.
Do not
icon on
remove.
there.
So you said it was leaking. Did you try it? Because it's
It wasn't. It was actually a different problem. It
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
leaking, which I'm not going to get into that.
Well,
But I mean, it was like a 3-minute fix to put the new shower head on.
yeah. It's
So it could have saved my Friday night. It really
it wasn't
not
Friday.
a good place.
It wasn't Friday, but on Sunday, I actually took the shower heads off and I just soak them in CLR,
yeah.
and then put them back on, and it was a way different experience. Like, I mean, it was the only thing was that it still had like that little drip, and I was like, I can live with it because everything else started working right. But
Well, that's the thing. I figured because it has a facing on it, so you take that off. But when you took that off, the whole thing came apart. So my wife cleaned it out. And I'm like, all right, put it back together in here, and it's anyway. I'm over it, right? I'm fine.
Yeah, you
There's
seem
some
good.
some
Good.
engineer like listening right now at like Big Faucet, just going like, I got another one.
Big faucet.
It's like not just planned obsolescence.
We were
it's-
going to get your $45 no matter what.
yeah,
But this was a lot more fun for us.
it's like planned obsolescence and humiliation.
It was a good time.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletters. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification whenever we go live. All right. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.